Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Save This podcast, where we have conversations about being young, Christian, and imperfect. I am Keith, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Caitlin, your other co-host. And today we have a special guest, Reverend Don.
Reverend Don.
Welcome. Yes, we claps for Reverend Don. So, Rev, on Save This, what we do before we get started in the conversation, we talk about our issues of the week. And the issue is basically something that didn't go your way or that was in your way or anything, all of the above. So I'll go first in my example. Unfortunately, this week, I failed one of my exams that was worth 40-something% of my grade. Love my life.
Did you study?
But yeah, I studied 12 hours a day and still failed, which was the more perplexing thing, but it's not about me. Reverend Don,
Wow.
What was your issue?
I don't know how you compete with that. Ooh. My issue is I'm starting a new job.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of trepidation.
Yeah.
Gotta give us more than that.
I'm a truck driver.
Yeah.
I've been over the road for the last year.
Oh.
Okay.
And I'm coming off the road, coming to a local gig.
Gotcha.
I mean,
Are you gonna miss the road?
probably not.
Yeah.
I'll be still driving, just not in the eastern part of the country.
Gotcha.
All the time.
So it's an adjustment.
It is.
Gotcha. I would say my issue lately has been like releasing control. As a founder, mostly, I have the company sometimes feels like your baby, but then you bring on talent because you need help, and then it's hard to release, some of that authority to make decisions. But I do like the new team members, and so I trust that they can do it. I just have to get out my way and trust that I hired the right people for the job. So yeah, working on that. But today we're going to be talking about a topic that's very timely. It's something that is as old as humanity itself, and it's something that it can, for me at least, bring up a lot of mixed emotions, and sometimes even cause me to question my faith, and that is war. As a disclaimer, we are not here to take any sides on any current wars or make this overtly political, but we want to talk about just kind of war in general as a thing, like I said, that has always existed, even in biblical times. And that is largely, one of the reasons that we invited you to, join in on the conversation. So if you could just kind of quickly let the audience know a bit about your service background, so they have some context.
All right. I'm an old school New Bethel member. I've been here 37 years.
Mm-hmm.
That started when I came to Washington in 1985. I was in the Air Force, and I came here to work at the White House. And the military, we call it the profession of arms. We're professionals in arms.
Mm-hmm.
That includes war. Therefore, I was 22 years in the Air Force and Air National Guard. I know a little bit about the military, about going to war.
Gotcha. And thank you for that service. Now, you said you've been, in the military 20 some odd years. How long have you been in the faith?
Great question. I was in the military first, came to Washington, came to New Bethel, got saved while I was active duty Air Force.
Wow.
I've been saved since 1986 when I joined New Bethel, and I only did 22 years in the military. So if you do the math, I have been saved longer than I was in the military.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, wait, you said you were saved while you were in the military, but you joined the church prior?
I joined the church while I was in the military.
Okay, gotcha.
But after I got out, I've been out. I retired in 2014.
Yeah.
So the years have stacked up in my salvation journey over those in the military.
That's interesting. I would imagine, or I would have guessed, you had been born, kind of raised into the faith, and then the military. I would expect that to usually be the order.
It's interesting you say that. I was born and raised in the church.
Yeah.
The church just wasn't raised in me.
Gotcha. No, I can relate there.
My mother was a musician, so I went to church every Sunday and graduated from high school, went to the Air Force, was doing my own thing. You know how we do when we leave home, doing our own thing. And went to Germany, left there, came here to D.C., came to New Bethel, heard the gospel, got saved, got baptized in New Bethel.
Got you. So now in terms of war specifically, have you been in battle or what does your service look like in that regard?
I've been to 2 war zones.
Yeah.
In 1984, I went to Saudi Arabia. They weren't at war, but that's the Persian Gulf.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, Iran and Iraq were fighting, and we were there supporting the Saudis. And we had something to do supporting the Saudis with them shooting down one of the Iranian F-4s. So there were some threats made. U.S., we know you're there. We know you had something to do with this. So I wasn't at war, but I was in a hot region, as it often is in the Middle East. And then in December 2004, I went to Afghanistan. And I was in Afghanistan for about 4.5 months. That was the war zone. That was at Kandahar, Afghanistan. Gun toting every day, walking around with M16 every day. That was the war zone.
So in your war experiences or being in the field, were there ever times that you felt the war that you were at or participating in conflicted with your beliefs, and how did you handle that that internal battle? Play on words there. Yeah.
That's a great question, because we often tend to look at things and say, you can either be in the church and of the faith, or you can deal with war, but the two shall never come together. But biblically, that's not the case.
Right.
As we know, biblically, there are hundreds of occasions where there was war, back in the Old Testament in particular, when Israel went to war. And I found myself, once I got saved and was in the military, I had to come to terms with the fact that, okay, now I'm a believer and I still wear the uniform. How do I deal with that?
Right.
And I think as you grow in your relationship with the Lord, you pray and say, okay, God, what's this about? Ironically, when I went to Afghanistan, that was one of the highlights, I think, spiritually for me. Because while I was in a war zone, the church was hot. I remember we baptized this one guy in the middle of a sandstorm. Yeah.
In what?
It was like a metal bathtub.
Like, where'd you get the water?
What? I think we have water.
But sorry, that might be a dumb question. Anyways, continue.
But I was in the military and gun toting at the time in a war zone, but we were very much in church. And so I think that you have to be able to say, I can bear arms, I can have a gun, and still be a believer. Yeah. And we see that with the police force every day. There are police officers who were saved and who go to work every day with a gun, and sometimes they have to use it.
Yeah. And I guess in a way that makes sense, right? I think, it can be easy to not have faith when you're comfortable, but, the reality that, your safety is in jeopardy, or that you could, potentially die, I'd imagine will bring a lot of people to God, because you start to have those thoughts and ask those questions. Well, okay, well, what happens if that were to happen? And do I feel, comfortable and secure about who's in control of this thing? And so I guess that makes sense. Did you ever, or have you ever found yourself conflicted about, the mission or, what your objectives were, and that they specifically didn't align with the faith? Because, I know you mentioned Afghanistan. I know that around that time, while I was just in high school, there was just a lot of debate across the country about what we were doing there, whether or not it was justified, or whether our motivations were what we said they were. And I'm curious, what was going on in your mind as you were literally there?
Right. I think that, and that's always a big deal. I was a baby or a young child during Vietnam. Yeah. My oldest brother went to Vietnam, and then talking with him afterwards, and he's sharing some of the stories and how that was a political war as much as anything. I think when I went, it was oftentimes as a military person, you have to look at, what are my orders? What's my role? What am I there to do? Yeah. And then decide if that conflicts with my beliefs or not. I was a communications person in the military. So I did communication. I made sure we had the internet and that the telephones were all connected with that, email, all of those things. Yeah. That was my role. But at the same time, everybody had a gun.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, communications are probably one of the more critical things for keeping people safe. So you know what's happening,
exactly,
what you can't see, and you can use that to navigate. I did want to, double click on, you mentioned your brother. You mentioned he served in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I have family members. I have an uncle who served in Vietnam, and while he's passed on, my dad often tells me that, who the guy who came back wasn't quite the same as the guy who went.
That is real. And oftentimes in war that happens a lot because, particularly with Vietnam, they were so young. Yeah. The average age in Vietnam was 19. My brother was 19 and he went to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And when he talked about many of the things that war subjects you to that are not pretty, I don't think it's possible to come back the same. Yeah. So he's highly intelligent, very functional, but he has what we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and he had some treatment and that, and he's a lot better than he used to be. And I remember when he decided to go to Tuskegee to go to it was a residency program for those who had gone to the same situation. And I stopped by and visited him while he was there, and he said, "Man, I should have done this years ago." Because I'm able to talk to guys who know the same things I know, who saw the same things, and it's helped him talk out some of that stuff and get some of that out. And it's made him a lot better because of it. But there are definitely people who come back completely different because you see things you can't unsee things. You can't. Okay.
So if you don't mind me asking, how did you handle coming back, and how did you implement your faith into healing in that process and dealing with your experiences?
Yes. And because we had such a close-knit church community there, I think that really helped while I was there because it gave me an outlet. We had church every Sunday. We had Sunday school. We were involved in that. Every Sunday, we got to hear the word and to be around people who were praying and that kind of thing. I think that helped a lot. I definitely still came back different. I didn't see any major combat. I wasn't shooting at people and they weren't shooting at me. Yeah. There were just explosions around and that kind of thing.
Just explosions.
I was going to
say, that's not exactly a small thing.
Right.
You get used to it in a way.
Okay.
But at the same time, when I came back, I was a little more edgy, I'm sure, than I was. I was a little more aware of my surroundings and situations. And it took a while for me to decompress. I could see guys who were really out there in the mess. I could see how they would really be. If you're walking down the street and you hear somebody throw a firecracker, you would jump in the ditches. So I could see guys who were out there doing that every day. I could see them coming back with that kind of baggage. Okay. So I prayed, though, to answer your question. It wasn't just about prayer and saying, "Okay, Lord, you got me through this." And it wasn't a negative experience. So when I came back,
So in general, I guess, not necessarily specific to your experience, but more broadly, how do you feel about war as it relates to your faith, and do you have, I guess, any strong feelings based on what you've seen some of your brothers experience? Just how does that all work with your faith and you kind of being able to make sense of it?
I think war is a very complicated thing. Why are we going to war? It's a big reason. Is it because we're trying to stop an ideology? We want to stop communism. That was the Vietnam line that they used as to why they were going to war in Vietnam. We were responding, at least in Afghanistan, to what had happened in 9/11 and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban's role in that, they said. But I believe it's very much important why you go to war. What's the reason behind it? And oftentimes, it's not justified. We look at some of the conflicts going on today. Some of them we can say, okay, I see why the response. But others, it's like, what caused that? Why is that happening? So there are reasons. And I think even biblically, there were times when God, I'll say, sanctioned war, when he told them to go to war, to do this, to do that. And sometimes I think one of those mysteries we struggle with, how in the world could God tell them to go to war? Sometimes he does. And there are Bible verses that talk about the fact that the king or the president or prime minister, as we would say, a lot of times they will yield the sword on behalf of the Lord. So I believe there are times when the Lord allowed, and certainly in biblical history, we can see where the Lord allowed that to happen to Israel when they were disobedient sometimes. He allowed the Assyrians or the Babylonians to come and to conquer them and to inflict a bunch of harm on them with war because they were acting disobediently. There were times when he sent Israel to do things like that. So God is very much, I think, involved in war to the degree that he's everywhere. He's always there. Because the question always is he present? And there's a saying that we say all the time, and you alluded to it. We'll always say that there are no atheists in foxholes. You know, when bullets start flying, yeah, you said you didn't believe in God, but when things get close, he might change that.
Yeah.
So God is always present, but I think the real question is how involved in the decision making is he?
Determining the outcome.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And it's almost, I can compare that to a football game. You know, both sides are praying before the kickoff. Lord, give us a victory. Keep everybody safe, all that stuff. Somebody's going to lose usually. I mean, they tie sometimes, but usually somebody's going to lose. And so the question is, does God really care who wins or loses? I think it depends.
That's such a tough question for me when it comes to war. You know, you mentioned God being everywhere, and I believe that, but I think some episodes of war, and a few other kind of examples are, you know, when you see children being, you know, hurt, killed, or just kind of things that just feels so wrong.
Right.
They do feel a bit godless.
It does. And I agree with that. They're all in war. There are many scenarios that happen.
Yeah.
And there are times when you say, okay, God, where are you in this?
Right.
And where's the God that parts seas?
Right.
Like, why did you stop doing those type of things?
Right.
Because
exactly.
I imagine there are people today, probably right now, that could really use that God to just say, all right, everything looks dire. There's no way out of this thing. And then something miraculous happens. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at those stories in the Bible, I've almost become jaded to a degree to say, man, did that happen? Because why wouldn't he
do it now?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like a overarching Christian dilemma of like, well, why not doing some of that stuff anymore?
That's a great point. Jesus himself ran into that kind of opinion.
Yeah.
He was hanging on the cross, and somebody said to him, he saved others, save yourself.
Yeah.
In other words, in fact, even before that, when he went before King Herod said, do a miracle for me. You know, I've heard all these stories and things you did. Do something for me. And he was like, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. There's a word that we talk about with God. We throw it around with countries all the time. We talk about the sovereignty of a country, but God is sovereign.
Yeah.
He can do what he wants, when he wants, how he wants, with whom he wants, and he doesn't have to ask any questions. I mean, that's one of those things that, as a believer, we get caught up on because we're like, come on, God, I'm praying for this. You said if I ask you, then, you know, you'll do it for me. And, you know,
And one of the hardest things for me, but it's kind of at the core of this thing we believe in, is the notion that it's not supposed to make sense, right? I think it comforts people, but for me, I'm like, what better way to manipulate people than to call that like the belief that you should have? Because then even when you ask questions, I don't have to have a good answer for you because you're not supposed to understand.
Right.
And so when I see coverage of you know, things that are happening now and things that have happened in other, you know, episodes throughout my life, it's like I'm supposed to just accept that I'm not supposed to know what God's plan is. And that's tough for me.
It is tough. It's tough for all of us because we are intelligent human beings and we
think so.
We think so.
Right.
But the Bible always compares us to what animal?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just talking about that with a
Sheep.
friend this week.
Now, if you know anything about sheep,
And
the brightest on the block,
they follow anything.
just wandering. They think they know, I guess they think, but they don't know. And we're like that. And the Bible compares us to sheep and children. And children is a great example as well because remember growing up when your parents had you do something or told you to do something, and there were so many things that you just didn't understand, and you were like, oh, that's not fair, and this and that. And then as you get older, you look back and say, oh, yeah, I can see that now. I think we're like that. God is a parent, and he knows all. And there are times when we're saying, Lord, I got this, but we really don't.
Yeah.
Or I'm ready for this, but you're really not.
That's fair. So I think we've dived into like physical war that you can see. I think another element of this thing is spiritual war, spiritual warfare. And I'm curious kind of what that means to you and how it's different than, a battle.
One of the things I believe as a Christian that we have to continuously tell ourselves is that we are in a dual environment. We're in a physical environment, but we're also in a spiritual environment. And one of the things that the Apostle Paul says, our struggle, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, rulers of the darkness. There are times when I think we forget the fact, we get so caught up in the here and now that we forget that there is a whole spiritual world going on around us that we can't see with our own eyes. And absent discernment or the Lord's presence or what have you, we're oblivious to it because we're really, life be lifing and we just doing what we do. But then there's a whole spiritual world going on, and God has a plan that he is orchestrating in the spirit and in the natural. And that's one reason I think why we can't get the whole picture and we can't comprehend it, because it's enough for us to understand what's all going on physically, let alone what's going on in the spirit. Right.
Yeah, that's overwhelming.
It can absolutely be.
It's funny that you said that because I guess like a little testimony, like a couple of weeks ago, or I don't really know the time. Anyways, pastor once gave a sermon on the spirit of discouragement. And that seems like such a simple, topic, trivial subject, whatever. But that was something that I struggled with the majority of my life, always feeling like I wasn't equipped enough, wasn't good enough, all the above, being discouraged and having that spirit really work in my life more than it should have. But I never fought that spiritual front with the word of God or with the spiritual front or with prayer. It was always like, let me do my daily affirmations. Let me get up and work out. And those are all good things, like you said, in the physical realm, and they help. But the word of God doesn't need a supplement. It's powerful to get rid of that spirit. And it wasn't until I had another member at the church pray with me and pray that spirit away to where I felt like I could walk in clarity and not have this discouragement over my life. So I think it's really important to hone in that point of making sure that you're aware, one, of the spiritual battle that you're fighting and coming to the battle with the word of God. Because that's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. You're not going to win that. So.
And Paul said that. He said, put on the whole armor of God.
Yeah, I was just about to say, there's literally the language there is the armor of God. And when I hear you talk about all the other places we go, I just see myself. I'd be lying if I said when I'm going through some version of a spiritual battle that the word is top 5. Yeah. not even first place. I'd be lying if I said it was top 5 in terms of places I go.
You go people, you go to
social media.
Yeah, everything else.
And the other spiritual things that aren't rooted in faith. Right. That's a whole nother episode we could do. But yeah, and it's, as I reflect on it, it is it's a little frustrating. It's like, why are you looking everywhere else when you claim to be rooted in this thing? And this thing has held you down for so long.
But that goes back to the point of comparing us to sheep. Sheep probably don't know how dumb they are,
Yeah.
So why would I know how dumb I am?
Yeah, no, seriously. But and I think I touched on this on one of the other episodes of how patient God is with us. I don't know if I would be able to have the patience to deal with sheep. I done told you once and you still go and do the dumb thing over and over and over. That's a problem. You know what I'm saying? But that's just, I'm glad I'm not God. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But that just speaks to, like I was saying, his patience and that comparison of us being sheep and following him as our shepherd, and needing him as our shepherd.
Yeah. And it's as we talk about this, I kind of bring it back to physical. And I'm like, imagine being over soldiers in the battlefield, and they going everywhere else.
Yeah.
Except for the orders you gave them. Like, no, I told you what to do in situation A,
Right,
B,
right.
C, D, and you out there asking people for suggestions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what the stars say you should do.
Right.
No offense to astrology
You
people.
stepped on some
But,
toes.
you know, retrograde, I can't do this. Okay. The Bible's right there.
That's real.
David, I think, had that same question in his mind when he asked, he was talking to God. He said, what is man that you're mindful of him? Or the son of man that you even visit us?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. You know, you made us a little lower than the angels, but I think he was really asking God, how in the world do you tolerate us? Basically, yeah.
It's a good question.
It's a great question.
I struggle to tolerate this.
Yeah, I was saying, I can't tolerate myself, let alone other people. And ooh, don't get me started. Anyways.
And then, to your point, Keith, when I told you X, Y, Z, and you want to do A, B, and C,
Yeah.
and you know I told you to do something differently, and you want to do something else on purpose, and then come crying to me when it didn't work, because you know we're going back to him.
And I even, like, when you look at just the time we're in, it just feels louder or noisier, I should say, than, and I've only lived in this time, so I can't say for sure, but than times before, because there's a screen everywhere. There's an influencer, like even at work, like there's so many people that profess to know what the answer is to your problem, and they're, you know, really good at marketing and communications, to where it does feel appealing, to where that you know, that old book or that old app on your phone just don't seem as attractive as this. Oh, we could do it quick, you know, with no work, which is our favorite way to resolve any issues or any battles we're dealing with. What's the quick and easy
That's how
solution?
you ought to know it's counterfeit, and it won't work.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because there is no quick way to success. I say that to people all the time. The only place that success shows up before work is in the dictionary.
That's
Other
cool.
than that, you got to go to work.
Yeah.
You have to work through it. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Reverend Don, thank you for your time and your insight. I know I've gotten a lot of nuggets from you today. Hopefully the viewers at home also have gotten things from the conversation. Definitely lots to digest and chew on and go dig into the word. But with that being said, we thank y'all for listening to the Saved-ish podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, or also known as X, YouTube, at Saved-ish Pod. And that's all one word, Saved-ish Pod. And like we said, hopefully this was fruitful. Hopefully you can go digest this and have a different viewpoint on how God has his hand in war, and even whether that's like physical war or even the spiritual war in your life. So we look forward to seeing y'all next time. Have a good one.